All right, in this video, I'm going to talk about Kant's principle of universalizability. Immanuel Kant was probably one of the most famous philosophers, since guys like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, the ancient Greeks. Kant is a German philosopher, and probably, yeah, maybe the most influential and important philosopher since those ancient Greeks. Now, Kant's view that we're going to look at now, and there's another sort of deontological theory that Kant gives, but as I just said, right, these are deontological theories of right action or theories of ethics. So consequentialist theories, remember, third personal, like forward-looking views. Deontological theories tend to be second personal, right? It's about relationships or what we owe each other, and they're backwards looking oftentimes. So they're not focused on what happened in the future. They're focused on like the moment of the action or something before that. Now, Kant's principle of universalizability is best understood when we think about it maybe in comparison to consequentialist theories or utilitarian theories, right? So you'll remember that utilitarianism, hopefully you watched right the utilitarianism video. Act utilitarians endorse sort of three principles, right? The consequentialist principle, hedonist principle, and the principle of impartiality. So Kant, in criticizing like act utilitarianism, one way he disagrees with act utilitarian is on the sort of consequentialist bit, right? So consequentialists and utilitarians, as a result, right, think that an act's rightness depends solely on its consequences. That is, they think like, what's going to happen after I do this thing? But for Kant, the rightness of an action doesn't depend on the consequences. It depends on the agent's intentions or the maxims. You know, what's a maxim? Very roughly for now, right? It's the agent's principle of action. What principle are they acting on? Now, it's important to note that Kant's not trying to say the agent should intend to bring about good consequences. So it's not just like consequentialism, but about like intentions. Rather, Kant thinks that it's important the principles on which agents act need to be ones that they would want everyone to follow. So, you know, what principles do you want everyone to obey? Not just you, but everyone. So Kant's principle of universalizability says this, and then we're going to sort of tease this out a bit. So it says an action is morally permissible if and only if its maxim is universalizable. Again, two new words, right? Maxim, what's a maxim? And universalizable, what does that mean? A maxim is a principle of action that states the following. 1, the circumstances you're in. 2, the action you're about to perform. And 3, the reason or reasons why you're about to perform it. So a maxim is the principle on which you're acting. It's got 3 parts: circumstances, action, and the reasons or the goal of your action. Those make up the maxim. Now we might want to know, well, when is a maxim universalizable? It's got to hit the following 2 parts. So 1, it's got to be possible for everyone in the relevant circumstances to perform the relevant action and still accomplish the goal of the action, right? So one thing I should emphasize here is that we're not asking, well, what would happen if everyone did this? Would disaster result? It's not about whether or not there would be a disaster. The question is, if everyone in the relevant circumstances performed the action that you're describing, would they still be able to accomplish the goal that they're trying to accomplish? Now that's the first part. If an action fails that test, then it's wrong. It's wrong to do it ever, according to Kant. But some actions can pass that part of the universalizability test and fail to pass the second part. So the second part asks, is it rational to will that everyone in the relevant circumstances performs the relevant action? So not just is it possible for everyone to perform the action and still get their goal, but is it rational for you to will that everyone acts on that principle, basically? This theory captures at least 2 deep-seated intuitions. One is that whether an agent's action is morally permissible depends on their intentions. So what matters when you're acting isn't just what happens as a result. Rather, what are you trying to do? What were you intending? What kind of action were you performing? That's one thing that this theory does better than consequentialism. Second, it gets at this idea that there's something morally problematic about inconsistency or unfairness. Right? It's wrong to act in ways that you don't want other people to act. We can't privilege ourselves over others. Right? That's something that seems pretty important to acting morally. So those two thoughts are things that Kant can explain that consequentialists and act utilitarians can't really explain. So let's look at some examples how this plays out. One famous example that Kant gives is the case of the false promise. So what we're supposed to imagine here is, say you want some money, like you're running low on cash, and you want to get some. And so what you're going to do is lie to your friend. You're going to say, you know what, hey, I forgot my lunch money today. I need to get some. I'll pay you back for sure. Now, in this case, let's assume that promise that you're going to pay him back is not true. Like, you know you're not going to pay him back. Like, you don't have any intention of paying them back. Would that be okay to do? Now, intuitively, the answer is no. But why? Why is it wrong? And Kant thinks he's got a pretty good, maybe the right explanation for this. So think about the liar, right? What principle are they acting on? What's their maxim? And is it universalizable? So we need to sort of do two things here, figure out what's the maxim. So let's identify the parts. First, the circumstances. When I want some money, B, make a false promise to a friend. Okay, so I'm making a false promise, a promise I'm not intending to keep. And then what's my goal? To convince them to give it to me. Okay, those are the three parts of the maxim. If you're evaluating an action using Kant's principle of universalizability, you want to sort of do those three things. Is that maxim universalizable? We've got sort of two tests here, right? The answer, I think, is no, right? How do we test this? We say, well, imagine that everyone in the circumstances, everyone who wants some money, performs the action, B, they make a false promise to their friend. Could they still accomplish their goal? No, they couldn't accomplish C. They couldn't convince their friends to give them any money. Why not? Well, because in this world where everybody who wants money just makes a false promise to their friend, what would happen? People would stop trusting anyone. So anytime you ask for money and you say, I'm going to give it back, well, if people are breaking promises all over the place, then no one's going to believe you. So they're not going to give you the money. So what that points out is that there's something kind of inconsistent about the false promise, right? You're making an exception for yourself. It only works if other people are keeping their promises. So for Kant, the problem with, lying in this case, right, making a false promise, is that your action only works if other people aren't making false promises. You're depending on other people to act differently than you, and that's unfair. Let's consider another one, right? Breaking in, stealing someone's TV. Again, obviously wrong, but we might want to say, well, why is it wrong? Is it wrong because it makes the person whose TV you steal sad? That might be part of the explanation, right? That's the utilitarian, the consequentialist explanation. Stealing TV makes people sad or makes them nervous and they're locking their doors all the time. Those are the downstream consequences. But for Kant, it's a different explanation, right? So again, for Kant, we want to ask this principle of universalizability, we want to ask, is the thief's maxim universalizable? We need to know the maxim. We need to know whether or not it's universalizable. What's the maxim? Let's say it's this. So circumstances, I want a television. What do? I steal it. Why do I steal it? What's my goal? To have the television for myself, to use it to watch TV. Is that maxim universalizable? Well, what we want to ask, right, is imagine that everyone in circumstances A does the act, B, Everyone who wants a television steals one so they can have it for themselves. If everyone in A does B, is it still possible for them to accomplish C? Possible for them to have it to themselves? The answer is no. Again, if everyone who wants a television steals one, then they can't accomplish C, right? They can't have televisions for themselves. Why not? Well, because other people are going to steal their television right out from under them. So as soon as you steal a television and put it in your house, somebody's going to come along and steal it from you. So really, the act of stealing just undermines the sort of concept of private property at all. So nothing's really yours if everybody's going around stealing things. So that's why theft and stealing stuff is wrong for Kant. It's kind of inconsistent, right? The only way you can benefit from that action is if other people are not stealing things. So it's wrong because it's inconsistent. You're making an exception for yourself. All right, here's another famous kind of case. This is a case that caused problems for act utilitarianism, right? We imagine you're a doctor and you've got 5 patients, these 5 people on the right over here. They all need different organs. One needs a heart, one needs a liver, pancreas, lungs, kidneys, I guess, the other one. So they all need something. And, fortunately enough, we get a healthy person who comes in to the hospital or the office who's got healthy organs, all 5 of them. So we realize we can kill this person, redistribute their organs, right? Give the one heart to the one person, the kidney to the other, sort of switch them around. And now this person whose organs we've harvested, they're going to die. But those other 5 people are going to live. And for the utilitarian, it seems like this is perfect. Of course you should do this, right? Let's assume you can get away with it. Nobody's going to notice. For the utilitarian, you should definitely do it. 5 lives compared to 1. This is great. But it seems like there's something wrong with that. And Kant's theory can explain why, right? Is the doctor's maxim universalizable? Again, we need to know the maxim. We need to know if it's universalizable. What's the maxim? Circumstances. It's possible to save 5, 6 patients by harvesting a healthy patient's organs. What do we do? What's the action? Kill the healthy patient and harvest their organs. Why? To save the 5, 6 sick patients. So is that maxim universalizable? We need to ask ourselves, imagine that whenever it's possible for a doctor to save 5, 6 patients by harvesting a healthy person's organs, they kill the healthy patient and harvest their organs. Why? To save the 5, 6 patients. Whenever we're in those circumstances, if everyone, whenever anyone's right in those circumstances, imagine they do this action, they kill the healthy patient, harvest their organs. Can they get the goal? Well, presumably, if doctors are harvesting people's organs and then redistributing them, we're going to find out, right? We're going to know, oh my gosh, doctors are going to kill you if you're healthy. They're going to redistribute your organs to other people. What would happen? Well, patients are going to stop going to the doctors if they're healthy. They're only going to go to the doctors if the worst possible scenarios, right? They're like, on their deathbed or something. And that really undercuts the goal of what doctors are all about, right? They're trying to save people. And they certainly can't save sick patients with organ transplants, right? If healthy patients never come into the hospital, right? If people aren't willing to, they certainly can't do this action, right? They won't ever have any healthy patients coming around to redistribute their organs. So the answer again is no. If everyone in these circumstances were to perform this action, then they couldn't accomplish their goal, saving the 5, 6 patients, because healthy patients are going to stop visiting doctors. So again, there's something inconsistent here. This action would only work if you're the only one doing it. If other people are doing it too, then healthy people won't be around, so it won't even be a possibility for you. All right, those are kind of cases that Kant's view seems to get right, and it seems to do a pretty good job at it. And all those examples failed the first test, the first universalizability test. But let's look at a different example. the Good Samaritan example. So some of you may be familiar with this example from church or Sunday school. Jesus tells a story about a guy who'd been beaten on the side of the road. There are some people walking by, a high priest, right, sort of religious authorities from the person's own community, right? I think, this guy belongs to a certain group of people. I forget. The Samaritans and I forget what the other group is. But anyway, people belonging to this injured guy's own community, the high priest and religious leaders, right? They sort of see him lying there and they cross over to the other side of the street and walk on by. They don't do anything. But the Good Samaritan, he stops, right? The Good Samaritan stops and helps the guy, takes him to the hospital and that sort of thing. So imagine you're the high priest, right? You're walking by this guy who's injured and you go to the other side of the road. Is that permissible? So Kant's theory is going to have a little bit harder time explaining what's wrong with that. So is the high priest maxim universalizable? We need to know the maxim. We need to know is it universalizable. What's the maxim? When someone needs help, right, those are the circumstances, somebody needs help, I'm not going to help them. Right? I'm going to go to the other side of the road. Why? To avoid the hassle, avoid whatever problems could befall me here, getting hung up. I've got important stuff to do, maybe. Is that universalizable? Well, in one sense, maybe yeah. If whenever somebody needs help, other people just ignored them to avoid the hassle, that's possible. I mean, people would be sort of injured, they'd be crying out for help, but everybody'd be avoiding them. And there's nothing, it's bad. There are bad consequences for the people laying on the ground, but there's nothing inconsistent with that. Like, in some sense, it's still possible to avoid people if everybody else is avoiding injured people. So there's nothing inconsistent right off the bat. But the second test is a different story. So I'm going to say this is probably not universalizable. So it's true that if everyone in the circumstances performed the action, right, didn't help, then they could accomplish their goal. They could avoid the hassle. But what's wrong here is that it's probably not rational to will that everyone does so, right? Since in some cases you're going to be the person who needs help. So what Kant sort of said about these kinds of actions that pass the first universalizability test but fail the second one is that they're imperfect duties. The thought was that we don't have a strong obligation to help every time we see someone injured. But we do have an obligation to sort of help in some cases because, someday we're going to be the person who needs help and we want someone to be willing to help us. So, it's not that every time someone falls down, everybody needs to crowd around them and everybody needs to help out. But the thought is when somebody falls down, yeah, somebody needs to help that person out. So we've got to help out sometimes, but not always. So Kant's going to say maybe the high priest isn't doing anything wrong here. He's got to help out sometimes, but not all the time. And was this one of the times he had to help out? Well, it's not really clear. So anyway, that kind of gives you a sense maybe for how something could pass that first test, but fail the second test. We're looking for, not only is it possible to perform this action, get the goal in the world where everybody does it, but we're also wondering, is it rational to want everyone to act on this principle? And I think that's not quite true for this one. In review, Kant's principle of universalizability says an act is morally permissible if and only if its maxim is universalizable. We need to, if we're going to apply this, right, we need to know what's the maxim, what is the principle of action, and that requires identifying the circumstances, the action, and the goal. Then we need to know what's going to happen in a world where everybody acts on that maxim. Is it still possible to act on that maxim and achieve your goal in that world? Why or why not? So if you're acting on that maxim, are you able to achieve your goal? If the answer is no, bad news. The action's wrong, right? If the answer is no. But then 3, the last part, right? Let's say it is possible to act on that maxim and get the goal, The question is it rational to will that everyone acts on the maxim? And if the answer to that is yes, then the action's permissible. But if the answer to that one's no, then there are at least some cases in which it's going to be wrong to act on that maxim. All right, that's Kant's principle of universalizability. Again, hopefully that gives you a sense for how it works and you're able to kind of deploy it in your various cases. All right, have a good one.